the interview off, I wanted to start with, originally when I spoke to you, I spoke about interviewing you for your contribution on the multi-track recording that you invented. But I wanted to, well, obviously we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing right now with the multi-track. But I wanted to, I wanted to.
Is that good?
But I wanted to start out and also say that your pianist, who's a friend of mine, John Coliani, pointed me into another direction that I felt was more interesting, being that I'm a jazz musician, and that is your earlier career. And he pointed me in the direction of some recordings at the Fillmore where you subbed in on guitar with Nat King Cole.
All jazz at the Philharmonic. Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to say that it, being that I'm only 27, I feel like maybe that some of your contributions on the instrument in that way maybe have been not properly documented.
Well, they were sort of ignored because of the popularity of the pop songs.
Right. Well, I mean, later on you had the sort of a pop career, but I'm talking about when I listened to what you were doing from a musician standpoint. You played on this tune, I believe it was Rosetta. Do you remember this tune?
I remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
There was a couple of
Earl
bars.
Hines.
Yes, and there was a couple bars you played for what at that time I felt was very outside the changes. It was like a whole tone. It sounded like Thelonious Monk on the guitar to me. So when I heard that, John Coliani pointed me in that direction, and when I heard that, I was really blown away by that. When I heard that. So can you talk about what the scenario, like, what was it like in those early years? When did you come to New York?
I came in 37.
Okay, in 37. So you were in the swing era.
I was right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle of it. And then here you are. I hear stories that you jammed at Mittens, correct, with Monk and all these guys?
Oh, yeah.
Can you elaborate on, tell some stories? That's kind of, when I heard that recording, it caught my interest from a musical standpoint, because, I've come through a jazz education at an undergraduate, at a college level, and through the history in the history books. But they don't talk about, what you were doing, and I feel like after hearing that there's a lot more, there's Charlie Christian, but what about Les Paul?
Well, if you'd like to know about it, what happened is way back in the early 30s, I became acquainted with Coleman Hawkins,
right,
Nat Cole, Teddy Wilson, Art Tatum, Earl Hines,
right,
and many other of the great jazz musicians in the Chicago, Louis Armstrong. All those people were very good friends of mine, Eddie South, and I worked with them at night. In the daytime, I was a hillbilly. As a hillbilly, I pulled down $1,000 a week. As a jazz player, I remember I played as little as $5 a week.
Oh, yes.
And the most that I could make playing jazz music was somewhere around $100 a week.
Wow.
in comparison with 1,000 doing the country bluegrass.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was broadcasting on the radio with the country music, and I was playing the clubs like the 5100 Club, the Barrel of Fun, the Ball of Fire. Those clubs had Danny Thomas, they had Jackie Gleason,
Right.
and all of the people that I mentioned were all in the Chicago area. Eddie South was over at the Bar Ritz on Sheridan Road. And so I was playing two persons at the same time. I was Les Paul at night, and in the daytime I was Rhubarb Red. And it was very interesting because Art said to Roy Eldridge down at the Three Deuces, he says, "Where does Les go that he has to leave here exactly at 5 o'clock in the morning?" He says, he dashes out and says, "Geez, I'm 2-3 minutes late. I got to get out of here right away." And so Roy said, "Don't you know that this fellow is going under two names, that he plays two different kinds of music?" And it was there that Tatum tuned in and listened and was very surprised to find that while I was ripping off all these jazz licks,
Right.
that
you were playing country.
at night, in the daytime, I'm yodeling and singing and doing the cowboy songs and the whole bit, and it was two different lives. That went till I went to New York.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, a new thing took place,
Right.
and that is I worked with Fred Waring just 2 blocks from here.
Okay.
And at 49th Street, I was at the Vanderbilt Theater. We rehearsed every day with Paul Whiteman, with Fred Waring, at the 53rd and Broadway, is where Letterman is now.
Wow.
And Major Bowles was there, and many, Harry James, Tommy, Jimmy Dorsey, many people.
Right.
They were all right here in this very area where I am now. Well, with Fred Waring, I used to play commercial jazz, but it was very. The melody was there all the time, and we had to worry about the sponsors and everything else, that they wanted to know what the song was.
Right.
And a vast audience, and it was many people, and the most important thing is to please the most of them.
Right.
But when the show was over, which was 7 and 11,
Mm-hmm.
when that second show was over, I was up at Minton's, and I was up in Harlem, and
Right.
I would be with Lester Young having some chicken,
Right.
Whatever it is.
Right.
We would fill our faces up, and then we'd go in and jam with the greatest, with Guts on drums, know, and we'd have some of the old Crazy Joe Jones on drums, and some of the very, very finest, Don Lambert and Leo the Lion, and it never stopped. It never stopped, and we played strictly jazz.
Right.
Next night I'd go with Fred Waring, and I'm doing Ave Maria, and I'm doing the opposite now.
Right.
That I did in Chicago. Instead of doing country, I'm doing something that's very elite, very high class, very schmaltzy, and that's the way it went there.
Mm-hmm.
Then I moved to California. When I moved to California, a new thing happened where I started to do jazz.
Right.
I started to do jazz, but I used a new name called Paul Leslie. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Nat Cole used Shorty Nadine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the names we went under out there
Wow.
when we were playing music other than what we were known for.
Right.
Okay? And so that turned out exceptionally good. And it was the first time that I had a chance, was at Jazz at the Philharmonic, to really let go.
Right.
And play all this stuff that was built up inside of me, and I wanted to play so badly, but you can't play it with Fred Warren.
Right.
You're not going to do it on some hillbilly show.
Right.
You're not going to do it with Paul Whiteman. You're going to do Begin to Begin or Over the Rainbow or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very interesting that we got over into Jazz at the Philharmonic.
Right.
Finally, I get a review from Leonard Feather. And Leonard Feather goes on Make Believe Ballroom,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, I'm reviewing the records this week with Al, and he said, I just wanted to tell you I ran across one here that is super. And he says, this is The Chase, and it's with Paul Leslie and Shorty Nadine. And he says, I just want to mention that you can tell that the Paul Leslie was influenced by Les Paul. but Paul Leslie was far superior to Les Paul. And so the following Friday, of all things, I'm on the panel, and being one of the interviewers and one of those people speaking at this long table with all the microphones, and Fletcher was way down at the other end, and I says, well, by the way, I said, while we're reviewing the records, I said, I heard you last week talking about me. And he says, well, I'm sorry about that, but he says, I have to be honest. And being a jazz player, he says, I could hear the similarity where he was influenced by you, but he's far superior in playing jazz than you are.
And did you let him know that it was you?
I sure did. I sure did.
I bet his face went white, didn't it?
Well, he never forgot it, and I ran across it last night on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to run across something where it says Paul Leslie, Leonard Feather, and that interview.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it really, really surprised me because it's just something where in my whole career I was never exploited as being a jazz player.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is I think that the electric guitar kind of gets skipped over in jazz a lot.
It does.
And I think that, as far as bebop, it's easier for them, or for that period, that transitional period between swing, where it formed into the bebop movement as a reaction to swing, and those jams at Minton. I think it would be easier for historians to give all the credit on the guitar to Charlie Christian.